And the fact that this is a democracy where there is free speech does not mean that everything everybody says is the truth. And there comes a point where some stuff is just made up out of whole cloth. The Holocaust did happen, and that's actually not a discussion to have. As a truth seeker, I'm not actually open to sitting down and having a serious conversation about whether or not the Holocaust happened. Some things are facts.
And today is a day of remembrance on the Holocaust.
Yes,
So
it is.
it happens.
Anyone else want to answer the question? All right, let's open it up to the audience. Any questions from the audience? We'll start here in the front.
You touched on it a little bit as far as their views on homosexuality and how there is inherent homophobia in the movement itself. But I'm really curious, how do they express that and still have people like Milo Yiannopoulos as part of their spokesperson to sort of court the LGBTQ community?
I mean, I think, so in Heather's remarks, right, discussing how they think this is for fun, it's jokes, right? So the homophobia can be dismissed as humor, and then those who it targets, right, don't have to take it seriously. But then there's that undercurrent, and I like the warning of whenever someone says it's just a joke, you know it's not just a joke.
Yeah.
That's one of those like qualifiers at the start of a sentence where you know something bad is coming. Same as not to be racist, but, or I'm not a racist, right?
No.
Almost, yeah, no offense, right? Someone says no offense, offense is coming. Someone says, I'm not a racist, but racism is surely about to follow. And so I think it has enabled this logical contradiction. And there's also, I think, this ordering of identity. And so they will put up with homosexuality while they are trying to sort out the white supremacy. But in memory of the Holocaust, right, we know it was not just the Jews, right, that the Nazis murdered. And so disability, sexuality, all of those things, the projection of the big tent begins to shrink as the lines of identity tighten.
You know, one of the most interesting clips is the one where, and I think it may have been Milo, right, who's saying, we've prioritized the feelings of Muslims over those of gay men, right? And it's that convenient kind of political shell game of whoever you can pit against one another, that becomes the person that the alt-right is advocating for. There's also a way, I think, in which I've seen them really kind of conflate a sort of gender conformity around LGBT identities. So there's sort of an acceptance for kind of a masculinist version, right, of gay alt-right life. So it really is about sort of these categories being flexible and a political convenience wherever they can start to divide more people and make more political hay, which is why I think that their agenda is inherently disingenuous. I think they stand for no one and nothing except for themselves.
Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay, another question? Why don't we go back here with the plaid shirt there?
So the Peshmerga have made inroads recently, getting Western journalists to use the term Daesh instead of ISIS to refer to the Islamic State. Daesh, of course, or it refers to something being trampled underfoot, and it doesn't hold the weight of or implication that there is an actual state authority operating through ISIS. I'm wondering if you all have any thoughts on similar terminology that might be developed in order to describe the alt-right.
They're all looking at me. That's very interesting, and I was thinking that when we were talking about how they are trying to groom people, that it seemed very ISIS-like actually to get them to agree to this identity, without the terrorism of a different form. I think this is like another issue, but it's very related. This is the journalistic issue of the time, is that journalism really operates under rules where people kind of play by the rules, and that you don't expect people to lie all the time.
Right.
And so that's why, people are going after news organizations, why aren't you saying Trump is lying? Because you don't. But now the New York Times has done headlines saying Donald Trump lies again, which he did. This is a fact, true secret fact.
Yeah, some stuff is fact.
So I think also in the tradition of news organizations where sometimes we let people come up with their own names. So actually trying to call the alt-right white supremacists and nationalists and racists is a step forward, I think, we're not going to let them get away with what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is, I do think it's still calling the alt-right at all, again, normalizes that outrageous behavior that should not be normalized. It's a very long, but I think it's all tied up in journalists trying to figure out kind of a new way of doing things. Etienne asked me about fake news, and I said, well, I don't like it. But it is now in our very distracted society, people have to pay attention to where their news is coming from, to what it is, whether it's true or not. We have more of a responsibility to do that, and it might not come in 140 characters. As much as I love Twitter, it might not come in 140 characters. We're going to have to look harder.
Mm-hmm. I think touching off on that point of the radicalization of kind of the connection of a terrorism in a very different sort of way is that they're the Breitbarts and the Reddit threads or whatever they're called, I don't remember. Are they just,
Wait, subreddits?
Yeah, there we go, that's the word. But they're convincing all these young men that society is against them right now. It's all the discrimination against them, or that feminists are ruining your society, or that your masculinity is being compromised by everyone else. You are the victim, and now join us, and we will make it better. And that's really how ISIS and other terrorist groups have been radicalizing people here in the United States too. And it's clearly not the same thing in terms of the violence and the height of their movements. But you can see the beginnings of that happening in a very different way.
Also,
No, go ahead.
okay. I also think that the term itself, alt-right, is just, and I know we've said this a bunch of times, is very ambiguous, and so people don't really know what it means. And I also think that it is interesting, and though if you break it down alternative right, an alternative to the right, but in reality they're drawing in people who would have more conservative ideals, and then being able to kind of conform them and change them into something that's much worse. So I think that that's very interesting in and of itself, and that they're saying that we're gonna take conservatives and make them something different and something worse. So yeah.
And I think conservatives in particular should be outraged, right, at their position in our political right does not need to include the alt-right, and they can say that, right? And saying alt-right is trying to appropriate membership. We are within the conservative bubble, we're just a little to the side of them. And, there is not this inherent connection between conservatism and white supremacy, and the alt-right making that positional move is trying to tie them to a conservative establishment that I think is very uncomfortable with their presence, or at least some are, right? Now I'm gonna say right every sentence.
Although, what's interesting too, though, about alt-right as a label is it is appropriating politically a conservative ideology, but I think it's appropriating culturally from progressive DIY. It sounds like someplace where you go to a little bar somewhere and it's sort of do it yourself. It's really taken out of this moment of kind of, something that's authentic and homegrown and something sort of more real and that really has much more of a progressive cast on it.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to go now to the gentleman in the blue shirt. You've had your hand up for a little while.
Thank you all. So panelists, my question is sort of is a springboard off of what you were just talking about. So this week we saw the censoring of certain governmental Twitter accounts.
Yes.
And the subsequent creation of many alternative Twitter accounts, like the Alt NIH, Alt HHS, Alt CDC, Alt FDA, Alt National Park Service. So for one political party, these are relatively innocuous accounts. They are funny. or there's the idea of conveying facts, but for another political party, it may be seditious or like anti-American or all of those types of things. And so I guess my question is about what role do you think the creation of these accounts has both to normalizing the alt-right, bringing it to the mainstream,
That's
and
interesting.
in drawing a wedge to push conservatives more towards the alt-right, since there are all these now other alt accounts for the other side.
Right.
So I think is interesting is as fervor over the alt-right kind of began to increase, and like when you look at the Google trends, it's like very low, not a lot of interest, and then in August there's this spike right around when Hillary Clinton gave her speech, and then levels off a little, and then back up for essentially the duration of the week around the election. And at that same time, you saw some conservative commentators who had been mainstreamed, in particular Sean Hannity, bringing up and discussing and trying to label the alt-left, right? And his description of the alt-left was essentially the Black Lives Matter movement, but a version of the Black Lives Matter movement that was just based on kind of the worst of, I think, political protests around race issues, and then ignoring the rest of Black Lives Matter, or creating this conflation. And in that move, if you create the alt-right and then you give it the corollary of the alt-left, then you're normalizing them into, I think, a very difficult, and Carol and I